and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Nick Blumberg. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. Here's what we're looking at.
We projected 4 to 5 weeks. We have capability to go far longer than that.
President Trump says a war with Iran could last 4 to 5 weeks. What a local congressman has to say about that.
The economic opportunity of building new clean power is enormous.
And what Governor Pritzker's nuclear ambitions mean for Illinois residents. First off tonight, a new push to investigate Jeffrey Epstein-related crimes at the state level. Lawmakers and advocates for abuse victims gathered today to announce a new bill creating the Illinois Epstein Files Investigation Commission, which would have the power to issue subpoenas and refer allegations to the Illinois Attorney General. Backers of the measure say Epstein's network extended into the state and that the U.S. Department of Justice is failing to act.
Accountability applies to everyone. No one should be prematurely exonerated, and no one should be presumed guilty without evidence. Let the investigations follow wherever the facts lead and avoid political filtering.
The measure also calls for a focus on sexual assault survivors, including trauma-informed care and access to counseling. Residents say new Chicago Fire Stadium must come with a community benefits agreement. Local organizations from neighborhoods around the area south of the loop known as the 78 and around the city gathered this morning to end a CBA ahead of tomorrow's scheduled groundbreaking for the new stadium and entertainment district. They want guarantees in key areas including jobs, transportation, and housing.
We continue to hear about affordable housing that's coming around in our surrounding communities. But if that housing does not include the incomes of people who are on a fixed income, then it's not affordable for us. If that housing does not include the incomes of people who are working every day and on just receiving minimum wage income, then it's not affordable for us.
Members of the CBA coalition say they haven't been invited to participate in tomorrow's event. With the Illinois primary just 2 weeks from tomorrow, election officials are urging voters to cast their ballots early. Early voting expanded to all 50 wards in Chicago today, as well as the downtown super site, where anyone can cast a ballot regardless of where they live and where residents can register same day or update their address. There are also 55 early voting sites now open in suburban Cook County.
You never know how the weather will be in the beginning of March or what circumstances may come your way preventing you from voting as you originally planned. So we are urging Chicago voters to vote early and enjoy the peace of mind that comes with getting your civic duty out of the way.
And if you're still not sure who you're casting a ballot for or where you can vote, be sure to check out our website at WTTW.com/voterguide. The death toll in Iran and the surrounding region rises to over 500 as U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio warns the, quote, hardest hits are still to come. Those comments after the U.S. and Israel struck Iran on Saturday, killing Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, raising concerns over the long-term ramifications for the region and the United States' involvement. President Donald Trump today says the strikes on Iran could take 4 to 5 weeks or far longer.
Our objectives are clear. First, we're destroying Iran's missile capabilities, and you see that happening on an hourly basis. Second, we're annihilating their navy. We've knocked out already 10 ships. Third, we're ensuring that the world's #1 sponsor of terror can never obtain a nuclear weapon. And finally, we're ensuring that the Iranian regime cannot continue to arm, fund, and direct terrorist armies outside of their borders.
But some members of Congress are pushing back on Trump's actions, calling for a vote on the president's use of military power. Joining us is Congressman Mike Quigley, a member of the U.S. House Intelligence Committee. His district covers parts of Chicago and some western suburbs. We also invited Illinois Republican Darren LaHood, also a member of the Intelligence Committee, but he did not respond to our invitation. Congressman Quigley, welcome back to the program. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
So it's been reported the Trump administration alerted just a handful of top congressional leaders before the attack on Iran. What, if anything, as yet have you been briefed on?
I think the administration is lying about that. I know no Democratic members that were told specifically that this attack would take place. There were some briefings that took place today. There'll be more tomorrow and Wednesday. But in terms of foreknowledge, that simply didn't happen.
This strike, was launched without Congress declaring war. There is a bipartisan push set for a vote this week aimed at limiting the operation. What's your expectation as to how that vote might go?
Yeah, I mean, look, the fact that this vote got to the floor took some Republicans and what we call a discharge petition to get to the floor. So the question is, will those Republicans stick with, I think, what will be every Democrat supporting this measure? The bottom line is the Constitution clearly rests the ability to declare war with Congress, and the president has obviously forsaken that on more than one occasion during this first year in his second term. So what we're voting on probably Thursday afternoon is in a measure to restrict that. I think it has a chance to pass the House. I'm less optimistic about the Senate. Of course, the president would never sign this. This is the president, again, who has said no new wars. Well, he has called this action a war. Indeed, it is.
And based on what you know, was there concern within the intelligence community about an imminent attack from Iran?
Well, I can only speak for myself that there was no notice, no briefing about an imminent threat to the United States. So we're left with wondering what was the exact rationale here. Clearly, the regime in Iran is a horrible entity that killed thousands of its own people. We'd love to see regime change, but what we've learned in Syria, Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, that simply a change in leadership does not lead to democracy. What's most likely here is that the leader was planning, because of his age and ill health, for a change in leadership, probably toward his son, but clearly someone in the Revolutionary Guard. This is going to be an extreme leader that takes its place. If anyone thinks regime change will take place without a full-fledged war, they're mistaken in the facts.
Yeah. I mean, what is the view, either from folks you speak with in the military or in the intelligence community about, are there, for example, opposition leaders poised to lead after regime change, for example, or is this going to pass, as you say, to perhaps someone who's already within the power structure?
It is far more likely to be within the existing power structure. This is a regime that has the capabilities to exact, as they have recently, just brutal repression. And the fact that, we're striking them now will reduce their capabilities, but it won't reduce their capabilities of repressing their own people. The real concern I have for our country is the fact of the matter is, when the JCPOA, a treaty we had with Iran, was in place, they were in compliance. They were not moving forward with a weapon. This is a country now ready to exact revenge on the U.S. and its allies. And they, as the president said, they are quite capable of terrorism. I'm concerned with a renewed and enhanced terrorist threat right here in the United States.
We've got just about 30 seconds left, but as we mentioned, the president says this could take 4 to 5 weeks or perhaps far longer. What's your assessment in terms of the timeline that we're looking at?
Yeah, history doesn't bode well, right? A wise man said, if you break it, you own it. Now that we're in this situation, it's going to be very difficult to extract ourselves. The president is all too callous with the deaths we've already had among our service members. Unfortunately, we're going to see far more.
All right, Congressman Mike Quigley, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And up next, a look at the future of nuclear power in Illinois.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
Illinois gets a majority of its energy from nuclear power, despite a decades-long moratorium on building new nuclear power plants. With that moratorium lifted earlier this year, Governor J.B. Pritzker signed an executive order directing state agencies to start planning for nuclear power plant construction that could begin by 2033. Here's a bit of what Pritzker had to say.
We can take years off of the development and launch of new baseload energy production. It sets a new nuclear energy framework for Illinois, one that prioritizes affordability, safety, and reliability. Our state agencies have been ordered to immediately begin working together and reaching out to local governments to identify sites for new reactors. It will also advance the development of a state regulatory framework with rigorous safety and siting standards.
Joining us to talk about the future of nuclear energy in Illinois are Tom Fanning, a nuclear engineer at Argonne National Laboratory, Mark Pruitt, former chair of the Illinois Power Agency and now an independent consultant at the Power Bureau, and Madison Hilley, managing director at Radiant Energy Group, a nuclear energy consultancy. We also reached out to a number of groups with concerns about nuclear power, and while none were able to join us, we have some statements to share in a moment. But thank you to the three of you for being here. Happy to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, Tom Fanning, a lot of folks are maybe familiar with the concept of nuclear reactors, but not exactly how they work. So, briefly, how do they generate electricity?
So nuclear power plants generate electricity via fission, which is the splitting of typically a heavy element like uranium. This is a technology that was developed here in Chicago back in the 1940s. The first chain reaction was in 1942 in the city, actually. And then that eventually moved out into the suburbs. And in 1946, Argonne National Laboratory was established. And we've been developing that technology since then. And so the idea, of course, is to generate heat to make either a very high temperature gas or steam to turn a turbine, which turns a generator to produce electricity.
All right, simple enough, but I wouldn't have been able to say it as well as you. Madison, looking at the current state of nuclear power in Illinois, how much are we producing?
Yeah, so we're actually leading the nation in nuclear energy production. Our 6 nuclear plants generate over half of Illinois' electricity. And it's part of what keeps our northern Illinois' electricity mix some of the most affordable and cleanest in the nation.
And what's the sort of maintenance that's required for the current fleet of reactors that we have here in the state?
Honestly, the boring answer is just proper maintenance and part replacement mean that these nuclear plants can run in pristine condition for decades. So we actually have reactors in Illinois that have licenses to run for 80 years. And there's no reason that they couldn't possibly run beyond that. The NRC is actually investigating life extensions out to 100 years as we speak.
Interesting. So if that sort of, the regular upkeep is maintained, they may actually be able to go longer than initially thought.
Oh yeah, exactly. Our existing fleet could continue to provide electricity for Illinois for decades to come.
Mark Pruitt, we just heard a bit of Governor Pritzker announcing his order. What was your reaction to that measure?
Well, I thought it was good news. For the first time in 30, maybe more years, the grid in Illinois and our neighboring states has actually started to show signs of load growth, which is more demand for electricity, which is quite different than kind of the managed decline that we've been noticing over the past, especially 10 to 20 years. So now the game has to change from deciding which plants close to how do we meet the new demand while not leaving the existing consumers behind. So there's cost issues, there's reliability issues, and the sooner they start thinking about how to bring these types of resources to the market, the better the result is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, with that increased demand, how important of a role do you see nuclear playing? Obviously the state has a lot of focus and has passed legislation to, encourage the development of clean energy, wind, solar, things like that. But how does nuclear fit into that mix?
Well, I don't know that there's any one better than the other. They're just different. Mm-hmm. When we're looking at the demands for electricity from some of the new industries, of course the data centers, but also the battery manufacturers, the electric vehicle manufacturers, and then electrification of buildings and moving away from more traditional forms of energy, what you really need is several layers of different types of energy, because in the end, we're wanting to spread our bets across a broader portfolio of resources so that we're always assured that the grid can deliver when the demand is greatest. And I think that nuclear and solar and wind, they all have a role to play, but the bottom line is we need more of each.
So after the governor's executive order, the Nuclear Energy Information Service industry watchdog, they raised some concerns. Those include a lack of language in the order around waste management and post-closure plans for reactor communities, concerns about staffing cuts at the federal level that could affect oversight, as well as concerns about the high costs of reactors. Madison Hilly, what do you make of some of those concerns?
I mean, I think this is sort of a last-ditch effort to scare communities from what is going to be a really powerful economic engine and investment for the future. Nuclear in America has an impeccable safety record. It doesn't get better than 0 deaths over more than 70 years of commercial operation. In terms of the waste, the nuclear waste is great. It's easily contained. It's currently getting safer day by day. It can be recycled. Very few people know that, and it can actually be fuel for this next generation of nuclear reactors we're looking to invest in. So I think, clearly momentum is for nuclear, for growth, for new economic prosperity in the state, and I'm glad to hear that.
You know, Tom Fanning, when you look at that next generation of nuclear reactors, you know, designs have come a long way since they were last built in Illinois many decades ago.
Right.
What might this next generation of local reactors look like?
So, as I mentioned, Argonne started a long time ago working on nuclear technology, and the focus has always been on secure, safe, and sustainable energy production worldwide, really. And so what developed in the early days was light water reactor technologies, and I think that will continue for the foreseeable future. But there are also companies, and Argonne has partnered with some of those companies to develop what we call advanced reactors or Gen 4 technologies that look at different coolant options, different fuel types. But ultimately, our focus has always been on the safe and sustainable operations of that power supply.
Yeah. You know, Madison Hilly, we just mentioned we haven't built nuclear plants in Illinois in many decades. Mm-hmm. Does the state have the necessary workforce and expertise to build the next generation of reactors?
Absolutely. If anything, Illinois should be the front runner in this competition for new nuclear investment. We have the most nuclear energy production of any state. We have an existing workforce with deep expertise. We have wonderful institutions, including national labs. So it really was ours to lose. But while we were coasting on our existing nuclear fleet, other states were actively competing for new nuclear investment. We can catch up, but we do have to catch up.
Mark Pruitt, you know, the governor's office says Illinois will not impose facilities on communities, that participation is voluntary and it'll be driven by local interest. What sorts of things should communities be thinking through as they try to decide whether nuclear is right for them?
Well, I think like every type of large industrial development, there's going to be an analysis of the trade-offs, right? There's this desire for jobs and for property tax revenue and all the plus sides, but I think that the communities have some additional due diligence. Of course, there's going to be concerns about safety and operations, and what does this really mean long term? Is this a 20-year, a 50-year, or a 100-year type of institution that's going to exist in our community? I can say that a number of the existing communities that are hosting nuclear facilities in Illinois are very closely associated with those facilities, Byron, Clinton, et cetera. And I think that they have a very close working relationship with the nuclear operator. Things can get a little scary sometimes if there's word that the nuclear plant is going to close. We saw that not that long ago in Illinois,
sure.
Where state intervention was necessary to keep the plants operating. And I think that those communities during that experience really had to start thinking about, okay, we have this great economic driver. What else do we need to be doing? You know, it's not just a one and done or a file and forget. They need to continue to manage their position. And I think that the communities are up for it. there are patterns and experience that other communities, the pattern's already been cut. I think that they can learn a lot from those other communities and come to a good conclusion by themselves.
Yeah. You know, Madison, you mentioned the excellent safety record of nuclear, but you know, a lot of folks may have things that stick in their mind, things like 3 Mile Island or Fukushima. What are the sorts of safety concerns you hear from folks when you talk with them about nuclear?
I mean, I do really think it's sort of like the worst case scenario. They think about China syndrome, 3 Mile Island, whereas, you know, 3 Mile Island is actually nuclear safety sort of at its best, where an accident happens and the plant just shuts down on itself, no serious environmental releases, no, you know, harm or public health issues to any of the workers or to the public. You know, that same thing can't be said of similar energy accidents in other industries. So it's hard to argue with the historical track record of nuclear in the US. And, you know, you talk to the people in these communities and they're very defensive about their plant. They know that it's safe because it's the members of their community that they go to church with, that they go to lunch with, that they have book club with, that keep that plant safe. So I have no concerns that Illinois couldn't lead on this while maintaining its excellent safety record.
You know, Tom Fanning, Argonne does a lot of work. You know, how do the technologies go from sort of research in a lab toward actual commercial uses in these reactors? What's that pathway like?
So that is the big challenge, right? Getting from the R&D space into the commercial environment. And the industry does a lot of innovation on its own. Where the national labs come in and can partner with industry is when there are new materials or new components or even new designs that they would like help, you know, from a national lab to kind of get through that gap, right, from the R&D space to the commercial space. Madison mentioned earlier about fuel and the potential for it to be recycled. That's a big political challenge, but there's also technology that needs to be developed to support that, and that's one of the big areas that Argonne does research in. And without that support, then it's going to be even harder for industry to try to take the next step.
Yeah, so looking ahead, you know, as Illinois is anticipating trying to get more plants online, it sounds like there's the potential there for Argonne to partner with government, with, you know, industry.
Yeah, and the executive order specifically mentioned the University of Illinois, so I want to give them a shout out. They have a great program down there as well. I don't remember them mentioning Argonne, but certainly Argonne would be, you know, overjoyed to help, you know, in our own backyard, in our communities. The people that work at Argonne work all around or live all around the Chicago suburban area.
Yeah. So the group NEIS that we referenced earlier, they also brought up concerns about cost effectiveness, saying that it is, quote, utterly incomprehensible why the governor and legislature would promote the most expensive, slowest to deploy, least cost-effective greenhouse gas displacing, most inherently dangerous, and in the case of small modular nuclear reactors, non-existent method to deal with it. You know, weighing that sort of the multi-billion-dollar cost of new nuclear against falling prices of renewables like wind or solar, Mark Pruitt, you know, how do you square that circle?
Well, again, this goes back to, you know, are some energy sources better than others? No, they're different. The issue with the nuclear is, I think that, you know, sometimes things are more expensive because they have a higher value. Being able to have a power plant that can operate at close to 100% capacity for 2 years with then a very short-term fueling turnaround time, that's a very valuable asset. And really, it's that type of generating profile that placed Illinois initially as more or less the energy hub of the Midwest over the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And again, that's not to take anything away from the wind and solar, which can deploy quicker, but those aren't 80-year assets. Right. These are just different. They have a different cost structure, but when we look at the normalized or levelized cost of the volume of electricity that's generated, I think it's probably a little bit different cost comparison than what the group indicates.
All right, well, there is a lot of interest in this topic. I'm sure we'll be talking about it much more to come. That's all the time we have for this evening. Tom Fanning, Mark Pruitt, and Madison Hilley, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And that's our show for this Monday night. You can stream Chicago Tonight on our WTTW YouTube channel every evening and catch up on any programs you may have missed. Join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10:30. The Democrats running for Cook County Board President join us to share their visions for the office and why they want your vote. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Nick Blumberg. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm with more than 40 years of experience in medical malpractice.